Welcome to Satsang.
Hello, Vishrant. Can you please talk about accessing superconsciousness?
Okay, so superconsciousness is knowing self as truth. When awareness is aware of itself, when consciousness is aware of itself. And if that's in an ongoing way, that is enlightenment. And so accessing it to give yourself a glimpse or a satori can be achieved in a number of different ways. Self-inquiry being one of the best, being in the presence of somebody who is awake being one of the best. But it can happen at any time. A person can have a satori or a glimpse of their true nature at any time. Walking on a beach, washing dishes, meditating. Self-inquiry, asking the question, who's aware or who am I, is the mind directly trying to access beingness, directly trying to turn that's aware back to itself. And that's an effective methodology. And so accessing beingness isn't that difficult if you're diligent with your practice of self-inquiry or meditation. For awareness to stay on awareness, or consciousness to stay aware of itself continuously, requires a mind that will be equanimous, a mind that is not creating disturbance, not attracting attention back to itself. And so that's actually the difficult bit. It's relatively easy to get a glimpse of who we truly are. People can even do it by taking certain drugs, but it doesn't really mean anything unless it can stay, unless awareness can stay aware of itself, unless enlightenment actually occurs. And so that's a little more difficult because the mind has to support that. And every time the mind contracts or goes into resistance against the world as it is, it creates a problem. It creates a contraction, a resistance that awareness goes back to. And so people can have awakening where they turn awareness onto itself, and then the mind contracts for some reason, and awareness goes back to the mind. And then there's a sense, at least from the mind's perspective, that something is lost. Of course, beingness can never be lost. It is always here. People think that beingness might be somewhere else, but it's not. It's always here. Every body is actually at their final destination right now. But the mind likes to think there's a bit of a journey. It likes to think there's somewhere to go or something to get. All that needs to occur is for awareness to become aware of itself and stay aware of itself. That's all. And it's here now. It's not somewhere else. It's not in another lifetime. It's here now. And so we tend to live or make our home where our heart is. And those who fall in love with truth, with beingness, that is where their heart is. And that is where their home is. And so you could say that there is a love affair between beingness and the mind. And in this love affair, the mind lays itself down in unconditional surrender. Enlightenment occurs. And so accessing higher consciousness isn't so difficult. Removing all the things that contract the mind constantly when it goes into resistance to the world, that's difficult. Because a lot of those contractions, a lot of that resistance is a result of belief systems that have never been truly examined, that were probably put in by other people or society or religion. And when the expectations on these belief systems aren't met, quite often a contraction or resistance occurs. In undoing the mind, in taking away these belief systems or discrediting them, they lose their power, and so does the amount of contraction and resistance. And so the work, if there is any work to do, is just undoing the mind, preparing the mind for superconsciousness or enlightenment. Beingness doesn't need any work done on it. It's perfect as it is, and it's already here. It's just the mind needs to be able to support it. And so a mind that actually has undone itself is ready. And then all that person really needs to do is either self-inquire, meditate, or be in the presence of somebody that is already awake, and awakening can occur. Up to you. This is your life. Are there any questions, any statements, or any challenges to this teaching today?
The first question: what's the most effective or efficient way of doing the work to prepare the mind for superconsciousness?
Yeah, look, we are all in relationship one way or another, whether it's with a partner or whether it's with business colleagues or whether it's with friends or children or just the people we meet day to day. We're always in relationships. And in these relationships, our contractions and our resistances to life show up because we don't agree with what's going on necessarily. And the stronger we disagree, the more we are against what is, the more chance we are going to contract, the more chance we are going to take ourselves into lower consciousness. And so our best teachers are probably the people that we don't get along with, because they're going to show us where we contract and where we resist. They're going to show us our belief systems that keep us in contraction. And so as a seeker, it's not a bad idea to value these people that you don't get along with, because they can be your best teachers.
The following question is from a viewer. We can disagree and not contract.
Oh, heck yeah. You can disagree and not contract. You can see something completely wrong that's happening in the world and not contract. It's not that you agree with it, you're just not into contracting. You're not into going into resistance because you're conscious enough not to, because you've practiced. And you've undone belief systems to some degree that create those contractions. Any time we put doubt into a belief system, it loses its power. But if we believe the belief system to be absolutely true, it is powerful. Have a look and see. We can be okay with the way the world is, even though we don't agree with it. We can remain open. We don't have to close. We don't have to resist. And what's more, our closure and our resistance doesn't make any difference, doesn't change anything. It just actually hurts us, because resistance is suffering. We create that suffering for ourselves through our resistance, which changes nothing. Have a look and see for yourself.
How do you recognize someone who has superconsciousness?
There's only one way that I know that is foolproof, because anybody can say the right words, have the right mannerisms, put themselves in a position of claim, saying I'm enlightened or I'm this or I'm that. Anybody can do that. But one thing that people who aren't awake can't do is produce a Buddha field, a field of energy that can be perceived, that quietens the mind and expands it. Someone who's awake carries that Buddha field, always. If it's not there sometimes, it means they are not fully awake yet. But someone who is fully awake always has a Buddha field around them. And this Buddha field is beautiful. This is the only way that I know that you can tell if someone's awake or not. What field of energy do they actually carry? Because when awareness is aware of itself, or consciousness is aware of itself, a Buddha field is produced. A field of energy that is very beautiful, that expands the mind and quietens it.
The following question has been written by Frank. Resistance does not change anything. Wouldn't it cause emotional disturbance, which influences choices, which influences behavior?
Oh, yes, it does. It influences your behavior. There's no doubt about that, Frank. I'm saying that your resistance, which is suffering, doesn't change anything in the world, really. It might change how you operate, but it doesn't change anything in the world. Not really. Your suffering doesn't change the world. You can move to change things in the world from a place of non-suffering, from a place of non-resistance, just as easily as you can move into the world and change something or try to change something from resistance. Why do it from a place of closure and a place of suffering when you don't need to do that?
The next question is from Craig on Facebook, who writes, if one's occupation requires the individual to contract in order to continue, does this limit the potential for higher consciousness in personal life?
I would love to know what job or career creates contraction in a person or creates an environment where they have to contract, because I haven't found any reason to contract or resist anything in 21 years. And I'm involved with a great deal of people, running many projects. So I'd love to know what career or occupation it is that you feel that contraction is necessary.
The next question is from a viewer. Is my hay fever an outward expression of internal resistance?
That's a question for a doctor or a naturopath. Fortunately, I am a naturopath. And my answer is I don't know. It could be. It might not be. You may have allergies that are there that you can't do anything about, or it may be because you're in resistance and somewhere, and in that resistance you're firing off your adrenal glands, whether through fear or anger. I found that usually aggravates hay fever a fair bit. But the bottom line is I don't know.
I find that I often contract because of my belief in what's right and what's wrong. How do you remove the belief in right and wrong?
The only true way I know how to not have the belief in right and wrong is to know yourself as the universe and see clearly the perfection upon perfection upon perfection that actually is. I don't know another way.
Some definitions of superconsciousness that I've seen involve accessing a higher self. Do you think there is a higher self?
Look, if there is one, I haven't found them. I don't think there can be anything higher than knowing yourself as the universe, knowing yourself as nothing, knowing yourself as everything. I don't think there can be anything higher than that. And so, in my experience, there is no higher self. There is the mind, and it thinks it's you. Then there is that that's aware of the mind, your true nature. And when that becomes aware of itself, there is the knowing of self as that, everything and nothing. This higher self I have never met.
Next question is from a viewer. Is there any significance of wearing different color clothes? Why do you wear white when doing satsang?
White is a sattvic color, or a color of purity. In the Hindu religions, they have an understanding of the three gunas, the three types of energy field that different things can carry and produce. One being tamas, one being rajas, and one being sattvic. Now they divide these three gunas into ways to help towards awakening. The different foods you eat, the different clothes or colors you wear, the type of music you listen to. It's right through the culture. So the Hindu religion has injected into its culture an understanding that will support higher consciousness and awakening in just about every aspect of life. And of course, Buddhism came from Hinduism. And so my understanding of the color white is that it is a sattvic color and that it is clean and fresh and clear. And so I prefer to wear white when I'm holding satsang because it is a color that gives a little percentage towards higher consciousness. The same as the food you eat gives a little percentage towards higher consciousness. Same as the music or pretty much anything has somewhat of these three gunas in it, these three different types of energy. Tamas being that lower consciousness energy that's kind of muddy and murky and unconscious. Rajas being active or anxious or movement, and Sattvic being pristine, clear, still. And so the idea is to go to Sattvic. The idea is to become Sattvic in mind, which you could say would be an equanimous mind, a mind that stays still even when being fired at. This sort of mind supports enlightenment. And so I look for the advantages for people. What will help? What, even if it's only a small percentage, what will help in raising their consciousness levels, including the color of their clothes?
The next question has been written by Adam on Facebook. I have heard you say the best meditation is watching the mind. However, I previously understood the Buddha taught to watch bodily sensations, like in Vipassana meditation. Did the Buddha teach one or both? Thank you.
The Buddha taught both because the Buddha was a scientist of the mind. In watching the body, what is real? And so that's present moment awareness training. In witnessing the mind, we are seeing how it gets us caught in lower consciousness. And because we can see it from a detached space, we don't need to get involved with it. And so having detachment from the mind as a result of witnessing the mind is really good. It's really, really good because you don't get caught in it. And so both methods, watching the body or watching the breath and watching the mind, are very effective tools towards higher consciousness and enlightenment.
What's the most common obstacle for people to access superconsciousness?
Yeah, oddly enough, if you're into higher consciousness, the most common obstacle, and it's hard to imagine, but it's collecting knowledge. Because we went to school and we collected knowledge and got our mark for getting answers right about that collected knowledge, we went on to higher consciousness to think that we could do it the same way. And it's just not true. No amount of collected knowledge will raise your consciousness levels, the same as no amount of collected knowledge will heal a wound of the heart. It just doesn't work that way. What works is the practices, the practice of meditation, the practice of watching the breath, the practice of watching the mind or being a witness to the mind, the practice of self-inquiry, the practice of openness. These practices raise your consciousness levels. The collection of knowledge cannot do that. It just makes you knowledgeable. So I would say that the greatest thing in the way of any seeker is the collection of knowledge, because it makes us think that we're getting somewhere when we are not. You have to develop a beginner's mind, and a beginner's mind does not know.
The next question is from Cooper. He writes, "Hello Vishrant, this is Cooper. My cat is dead. Will it get reincarnated as a cat again? Thank you," from Cooper.
Cooper, my young friend, the cat will get reincarnated again, Cooper, but I don't know as to what. All life forms get reincarnated, but I don't know to what. It may become a cat again. It may become a human. It may become a dog. I don't know. But everything evolves towards high consciousness slowly. And so it will be born again. Okay, Cooper?
The next question, do you think that too much sexual activity can keep me stuck in lower consciousness, as it is associated with the lower chakras?
Well, the question begs to be asked, what is too much sexual activity? Oh, really? I'm not against nature. Not at all. Nature is nature. Sexual activity can be used to raise consciousness levels. It's probably the hardest thing to use to raise consciousness levels, but it can be. By being 100% present in the act of lovemaking to what is, one develops present moment awareness and intimacy with the other. But can you be 100% present during lovemaking? Can you be totally with what is? It's a bit of a task. People tend to get into a bit of dream when they get into lovemaking, and that kills all intimacy anyway, because dreams can't really meet. When you truly meet another human being in lovemaking, by being 100% present to them, you melt as an I and you find yourself as one. And this is very beautiful. This is called Tantra.
How do you know that everything is slowly evolving towards higher consciousness, as you said? Does this mean we don't need to do anything and we'll eventually get to enlightenment?
Possibly, that's possibly true. The reason I say that everything is being reincarnated is because that is my own direct experience. Lifetime after lifetime after lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. Hundreds of lifetimes and the memories of them. So I know that reincarnation is real because I remember them. I started remembering them when I was about 12 years old, and I was a Catholic boarding school boy, so it was a bit weird because in Catholicism you only have one life. So I was having quite a struggle at that time with what I was remembering. But it was so. We have lived many times before, in many forms.
Is it a worthy pursuit to try and remember past lives?
Not really. The only thing that I got from past lives after witnessing hundreds of them was you don't want to do this again. Samsara, the cycle of birth, life, death, and reincarnation, birth again, is basically painful. People suffer during their lives until they die, basically because that life is dissatisfying. We're constantly desiring things to be different than how they are, which is suffering. And we get attached to the things that we feel we love, and then we get fearful of losing them. This is suffering. This happens to all human beings. And so this cycle of samsara can be ended through enlightenment, knowing yourself as truth. The ego dies before the body does. Freedom. Nirvana.
The following question is from a viewer. You said painfulness is the reason to avoid the cycle of samsara. But shouldn't we be okay with pain?
It's not really painfulness. It's like if you're going around the block in a motor car or just walking around the block and you just do it continuously, how long do you reckon it takes before you get a bit tired of doing it? It's not really about avoidance of pain. It's just that if you're not awake, you're living as something that you're not. You're not the ego. You're not this thought structure that thinks it has a past and a future. That's a dream. You are pure awareness, and you are here now. And if you can find a way as a mind to support that awareness knowing itself, there is liberation. It's a worthy cause. If you wake up in this lifetime, if awareness becomes aware of itself in you in this lifetime, you become a light so others can see. It's very beautiful.
Is this being tired of going around the block feeling enough of a motivator to take one to liberation?
It wasn't for me. I was curious. I just wanted to know what was at the top. And once I discovered what was at the top of the mountain, I wanted to stay there. And my mind fell in love with beingness. It fell in love with truth. And it became willing to do whatever it took to support that. Because home is where your love is. And my love was with truth.
The next question is: perceiving energies a sign of higher consciousness?
Not necessarily, it just means there's a certain part of you that's open that allows you to perceive them. I think that babies perceive everything, and as they get overwhelmed or they get affected by it, they develop defense systems that stop them from perceiving because it can be too much. But someone can get cracked open through trauma and start perceiving energies, and so it doesn't necessarily mean they have higher consciousness. They could just be damaged.
The next question is from Julia on Facebook. When you become enlightened, do you stop being reincarnated?
You know, I'll find that out. I don't know. I've been led to believe that's true, but I don't believe anything. If it's not my own direct experience, I don't count it as true. So we'll see. It's a little bit like I got into the meaning of life, or looking for the meaning of life or the purpose of life when I was a teenager, a young teenager. And I've been looking for the meaning and the purpose of life since then. And as of yet, I still haven't found it. There's just life. That's it. And as far as reincarnation and ending the cycle, we will see. I don't know yet. We'll find out. I don't know is probably one of the best answers you can ever have, because it leaves you with nothing, which is beautiful.
The following question is from Craig on Facebook. Does Buddha field recognition require physical closeness? In this present moment, I'm finding it very difficult to formulate thought. My answers fill my attention before my questions begin. Thank you.
Buddha fields can be transmitted through video, through audio, and through pictures. I used to get a hit off my pictures of Osho Rajneesh, who was my spiritual master. I used to get a hit off his talks on tape and on video. I'd find my mind expanding. I'd find my mind going quiet simply by listening. I believe that Buddha fields can be transmitted in many ways, but the best way is to be in the presence of someone who's awake. I fell in love with that presence. I fell in love with the presence of Osho. I fell in the presence of all my Advaita Vedanta teachers. I just fell in love with them. And in that love affair, I fell in love with truth. And I decided to give truth everything. In unconditional surrender to truth, awakening occurred. Not my life anymore. Truth's.
What happened in your life to contribute most to raising your consciousness levels?
Oddly enough, it wasn't anything spiritual. It was a need to survive. I grew up in a rather violent environment as a kid in a boarding school, and unless I was switched on to what was happening around me all the time, it was dangerous. And so I developed present moment awareness of what was real, what was actually happening around me at quite a young age, which I kept through my adult years. When I found meditation, I found it very easily because I was already very present as a result of being switched on by being in a dangerous boarding school. And so when I look at higher consciousness, because part of higher consciousness is being switched on to reality, it was initiated by a dangerous environment at school and my need to be present to what was happening around me. If you are present to reality, if you are present to what's happening around you, you're in meditation. Not a bad start.
This question has been written by a viewer. I love truth and see the value in higher consciousness, but struggle with the practicalities of going through the dark night of the soul and trying to be in the marketplace, work, raise a family, etc. How did you manage it all?
Well, I also raised a family. I raised two families because I had split. I separated from one previously. I raised three children altogether, and I worked continuously as a naturopath and psychotherapist while going through the dark night of the soul, while going through all the different things that have been trapped in my body and undoing all the different belief systems that created suffering in me. And that was all done while working, while raising a family, while being in the marketplace. And that is why I teach the way I teach, because there are methodologies that are great if you're in a monastery or if you're a monk or a nun somewhere in an ashram, but they don't work in the marketplace. What's required in the marketplace is a little different. I found that I had to practice openness, and that supported heart, while at the same time practicing meditation and self-inquiry, two disciplines. The practice of openness allowed me to be in my heart, and because I was in my heart, I could deal with the dark night of the soul. So that was like one wing, the wing of devotion, the wing of the heart. The other wing in the marketplace was that of discipline, meditation, and self-inquiry. And so I did these three practices, and it gave me two wings to fly in the marketplace with. Because if you're practicing openness, you actually have to find a way to accept life, otherwise you can't stay open. It's just how it is. If you're practicing meditation, you can see the different things that are contracting you. You can see the belief systems that are involved because you're witnessing the mind. And so you can undo these things. If you're practicing self-inquiry, you can start turning awareness back onto itself and fall in love with truth. And this is the way. This works in the marketplace. So it's a bhakti and a jnani path. Not just a jnani path, not just a bhakti path, but a combination of the two that actually work in the marketplace. And I have never told anyone that it is easy. It is difficult. But high consciousness is the best game in town. It's worth going for.
How did being in your heart help you through the dark night of the soul?
It allowed me to have compassion for myself. And in that compassion, I could hold myself in tenderness while things weren't going well, when I was seeing things about myself that I didn't necessarily like, when I was seeing my own brokenness and having to feel the pain of repressed emotions. Being able to hold myself with love made it easier. To be tenderly okay with whatever appears demands a level of heart. And if we really want to heal the wounds of our heart, holding ourselves in tenderness is the way.
The next question, are there different levels of higher consciousness that you must access before living in superconsciousness?
Some people say so. I don't think so. Higher consciousness basically means you can see through the mind and you're not getting caught in it anymore. That's bottom line. You've seen through the mind, you've seen all the belief systems, you've seen all the defenses, you've undone the mind, and you're not contracting to life anymore because you can see it all clearly and it's been all done. This is higher consciousness. Super consciousness is very different. It's knowing yourself as truth, which is beyond the mind. It's up to you. Higher consciousness is difficult, but it is pretty much a necessity before super consciousness. People can get glimpses of super consciousness before enlightenment, but it's unlikely that that's going to stay if they haven't done the work to create higher consciousness in their own minds.
Would you say that developing self-acceptance and healing the pain body are foundations to accessing superconsciousness?
There's no foundation to super consciousness really, because beingness is already here no matter what the mind is doing. It's just that that's aware of the mind tends to be locked onto the mind. When it starts turning back to itself through any form of practice, self-inquiry particularly, there is the potential for it to stay aware of itself. But there's also the strong potential for it to not, to turn back to a mind that is constantly contracting and resisting. And so all resistances need to be undone if you really want to give yourself that edge towards enlightenment. Though the funny thing is, the thing that wants to get enlightened doesn't get enlightened. The mind never gets enlightened because the mind itself is a dream. It is that is aware of the mind that becomes aware of itself and stays aware of itself. That is enlightenment. A mind that stays quiet, a mind that doesn't resist life, will support that.
The next question. Often I get caught in constant doing from the time I get up to when I go to bed. Feeling happy at times, but sometimes it also makes me stressed and unconscious. Is this constant doing in the way of higher consciousness?
Yeah, it is. It is. You want to gain higher consciousness, you need to be able to be still. You need to be able to be silent so you can see properly. While you're constantly doing, you're distracting yourself. More than likely, you're distracting yourself from feeling something. But it could have become a lifelong habit of dualism. There's lots of different ways to escape wounding that we have inside, and one of them is dualism, alcoholism, drug taking, gaming, food. There's so many ways. But can you be still? Can you be quiet? And then just see what happens. Just watch the mind. Can you be like a stone and not move? Just witness. This will show you where you're at.
Sometimes I feel a sense of pointlessness when it comes to striving for higher consciousness because it's not easy. What is your motivation to help people to higher consciousness and to access superconsciousness?
Compassion, born from love. There is no other motivation. When you love people, and that's what happens when your heart awakens, you just love people, you love everyone. You want to take care of them. You want to in some way help them. And for most people you can't help too much because they're not seekers. They're unconscious to that. But you can light them up. You can take away some of their pain. But the motivator, there is no other motivator but love. And because of love, you just want to take care of everybody and everything. Because this is how love affects the mind. It's very beautiful. Path, I would agree. Absolutely agree. But it does kind of demand that you get out of the way because you tend to be the obstacle. You tend to be the one that keeps contracting and cutting yourself off from your own heart. Openness supports heart. Undefendedness supports heart. Being vulnerable supports heart. And what stops you from perceiving heart is defendedness and closure, contraction, resistance. And so the way of the heart, in a lot of ways, is the path of least resistance. And it's beautiful. It'll motivate you to take care. You see, if the whole world had heart, we wouldn't have any wars, we wouldn't have any terrorists, we wouldn't have any murders, we wouldn't have any rapes, we wouldn't have any theft, we wouldn't have any starvation, because everybody would be taking care of everybody. The problem with this world is there isn't enough heart. But you can make a difference. You can open up. You can drop your defenses. You can awaken as heart. It's up to you.
Do superconsciousness and heart always go together?
You can go directly to superconsciousness through self-inquiry and bypass heart. But if you stay in superconsciousness, you're likely that the heart's likely to open anyway. Because to be in superconsciousness, the mind is in a state of surrender, which is the right ground for heart too. Some people find heart before. You can wake up heart as an ego simply by being out of the way, simply by being wide open, simply by being vulnerable. Or you can wake up to truth and not have heart because you've used self-inquiry as a methodology towards heart. But after awakening, you'll find heart, because after awakening, there's nothing in the way anymore. All the obstacles are gone. You're just wide open. And then heart appears, affects the mind in such a way that you just want to take care of everything and everyone. This is the beauty way.
Following question has been asked by Terry on Facebook. If in a previous life I did a lot of work towards higher consciousness, would it be easier in this life?
Heck yeah. We carry our credit and our debit life to life. So we carry our good karma and our bad karma from life to life. And this is why if you go into any Buddhist monastery and ask the abbot, what can I do towards enlightenment? They'll say, become a generous person. Take care of others. Be kind. Be gentle. Because this accrues good karma. Any time that we are involved in something that hurts others, well, or ourselves, we're accruing negative karma. But this karmic credit and this karmic debt comes in lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. And so people think, wow, I'm suffering a great deal in this life. Why is that? Well, maybe you're paying something back from a previous life. Or maybe you're doing very well in this lifetime. Your consciousness levels are going through the roof and you don't really know why because you haven't done that much. You're carrying credit from a previous life. And so that credit is paying out. Some people are born awake. I haven't met one yet, but I've heard of them. Well, if they're born awake and they stay awake, that's just a carry-on from a previous life. I think Amma, mother, was born awake, I heard. Well, that would be a result of previous lifetimes of work. It's all karmic.
Does your ego have to be completely destroyed in order to have superconsciousness?
Completely destroyed? I don't think so. It's the story of you that usually is a problem. If there isn't a story of you, there isn't a problem. And so in Buddhism, sometimes they say, no I, no problem. But it doesn't need to be destroyed. It just needs to learn acceptance and surrender. I mean, if you really look at it, what you need to learn, that's it. That's the only thing a human being needs to learn towards higher consciousness, is acceptance and surrender. If we're in acceptance, we don't resist life. We don't contract to life. We support life. And if we're in acceptance of life, we're wide open. And we're now supporting heart. It's very beautiful. So the only thing that a spiritual seeker really needs to learn is openness. Openness counts for everything. In practicing openness, we are practicing the true revolution against the contracting, defended mind. This is the revolution.
Are there any indicators that can tell me I'm going in the right direction towards higher consciousness?
It's difficult because quite often when people get into higher consciousness, they go into the dark night of the soul and it feels like they're going the wrong way. Everything inside them says, no, you're going the wrong way, because it's so uncomfortable. And this is where being with others who are into higher consciousness helps. Being in a community of people who are going for higher consciousness, or with someone who has higher consciousness, because they will support you in going in the direction that is the right direction. We are programmed primarily to avoid pain and chase pleasure. And of course, if we're into healing the wounds of our heart, if we're into undoing the belief systems of our mind, this is going to be hard. It's going to be uncomfortable. So it goes against this primal programming. It's always best, if you're into higher consciousness, to hang out with people who are also into higher consciousness, going in the same direction as you. For myself, I chose teachers who could see me and who were prepared to tell me what they could see. I wasn't interested in being told how lovely I was or how well I was doing. I was interested in seeing the obstacles that were in my way. And my teachers, particularly a man called Tirtha, who was one of Osho Rajneesh's therapists, was particularly good at this. And so I did a lot of work with him in the 80s. It's up to you though. It's difficult. I had a great deal of help. I had teachers the whole way through showing me the way. I think if you try doing it by yourself, the ego is such a defensive, protective entity that it will find a way to avoid. It's good to be in the company of people going the same direction who will help you and support you in that. Because people who aren't into higher consciousness won't support you. They don't have the ability to. They don't even know where you're going. They don't even know what you're doing. They don't understand it. Because if you're not into higher consciousness, you're probably just into being comfortable. Whether that's through workaholism, foodaholism, alcoholism, doing drugs, gaming, whatever. There's a myriad of different things. And those things are just medication, really. People medicating themselves because they're uncomfortable. But if you're into higher consciousness, you can't really medicate yourself anymore. You've got to face the music, and it's difficult. That's why it's best done with people traveling in the same direction, people who will support you.
The next question. Meditation is a main practice for Buddhism and other spiritual traditions. Can meditation alone take people into superconsciousness?
Look, I would say yes, but it has not been my direct experience. My direct experience tells me that self-inquiry can take you into higher consciousness or superconsciousness. And so I can say that meditation allowed me to see through my mind, allowed me to see the obstacles, the defense systems. It allowed me to witness the mind, to see what games it was playing with me, how dishonest it was, and undo my mind because it could see. So meditation also allowed me to find a lot of peace, a lot of no mind, but it didn't actually show me truth. What showed me truth was self-inquiry. First done the Zen practice of asking the question, who am I? And discounting it, and then asking the question again for hours and hours on end. And secondly, the Advaita Vedanta methodology of self-inquiry, of asking the question, who's aware, or who am I, in an attempt to turn awareness back to itself. I found those two methodologies very helpful and effective in showing me who I truly was. The other thing that really helped was sitting in the presence of my teachers. It was a bit of a gift. Towards the end, all I had to do was be in their presence, and I was gone, and beingness was aware of itself. So I'm very grateful to those teachers, very grateful for those people who are willing to be lights for those others, for myself. But meditation itself, a great tool, allowed me to see a great many things, and maybe people can find enlightenment through it, but it has not been my own direct experience, so I can't say yes. I say I don't know. I advocate meditation as a practice towards higher consciousness and enlightenment. I advocate self-inquiry and openness. These things all work. Thank you for Satsang. Good to see you brave hearts here today.